Welcome to the Man Up God's Way podcast, a show that dives into the real, raw, and relevant issues for men and their faith, life, and community. Now, your host, Jody Burkeen.
Hey guys, Jody Burkeen here with Man Up God's Way podcast. We're excited tonight. We got a great guest that we'll introduce here in just a minute. But as usual in the studios here tonight, we've got Mr. Ben Neely. Ben, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing well. You
hanging in there?
Good to see you. Yep, another Monday night.
Good. I hear you started a diet again.
Well, yeah.
Okay, yeah, me too. I did. I started a couple of weeks ago. I think it's hilarious because Ben and I, we go back and forth on the whole weight thing, and we both lose a ton of weight, and then 6 months later we've gained that plus back. That's double. Right. And Ben came in tonight. I love him because I know his pain, and I know exactly. So
let me
doing.
tell it. So I walked in tonight, and in one hand I have a frozen Coke, and in the other hand I have an unsweet tea. And I said to these guys, I said, this is my diet life. And Fregosa, our in-house wrestler and just in shape dude, goes, he wasn't letting me finish. And he said, that's your diet plan? I said, no, I'm trying to tell you that this is my problem with my diet plan. I do intermittent fasting, but not enough. So last night I get done eating dinner at 5. I fast until dinner tonight. I come home. My wife had 4 keto taquitos made for me with this no-carb pita stuff that she uses. I only ate 2 of them. I'm feeling good. And I get here, and I'm a little earlier than I wanted to be. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go get an unsweet tea from McDonald's. Yeah, right. And that's not what happened.
The only thing I heard in that story was I was here earlier than I wanted to. And it was 30 minutes late.
I can't sit here and watch you two fumble with the electronics for half an hour.
30 minutes late. I got way too early.
About 6 or 7 years ago, I was down in Georgia, and I was on a diet. Man, I was doing really good. Everything was great, and I pull up to this. Actually, it was longer than that because Chick-fil-A's weren't even here yet. They were still down south. And so it's probably 10 or 15 years ago now that I think about it. And so I saw a Chick-fil-A, and I thought, man, I'm just going to go in. I'm going to get a grilled chicken sandwich with no bun, just lettuce and all of this.
The devil talking.
So
my gosh.
So I'm waiting in line, and you know how long the lines are at Chick-fil-A, and I'm like, chicken sandwich, grilled chicken sandwich, grilled chicken sandwich. She's like, I pull up. She goes, how may I help you today? And I was like, I'll take a fried chicken sandwich, a large fry, milkshake. I just went down the list. Yeah, exactly.
It's terrible.
So, Fregosa, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man.
Good.
Yeah, another week.
Awesome.
Another day.
Cruising. Well, glad you're here. So, well, good. Hey, why don't you real quick talk about our new membership program that we have?
So, we've talked about this the last couple of weeks. We have kind of opened it up and asked you guys to come support us for the first time here. We started at the beginning of this year playing with this idea of having subscribers and subsporters at $5, $15, and then there's even a men's group that's a deep dive at $125 that it actually comes with a weekly not one-on-one, but very small, intimate group of men that are coming together and helping you lead your own small group at your church. But those $5 and those $15 a month, buying us a cup of coffee, buying us a meal every week, that really keeps this show going and allows us to do this on a consistent basis. So that's what we have going on. We'll share it in the bottom of these videos, and you can always go to manupgodsway.org to find out more information on that.
And we're not a fly-by-night podcast. This is our 70th episode tonight. So
I know.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So things are going well, and God just keeps pushing us up the charts, and it's been exciting. So, well, good. Thanks, Fregosa, for that. Tonight we've got looking forward to an amazing guest. I love having these kind of guys on because I do believe that we're in a time that their services are needed, and I'm going to let Chris Bruno come on and explain everything that he's got going on. Chris, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. I'm doing awesome. Great to be with you guys. I love even the diet conversation. There's so much I could say about that as well. So glad to be with brothers.
Well, glad you can join us here, Chris. we've got a lot to talk about, and we've got all night to talk about it. So don't feel rushed, and take your time just explaining some of the great things that you have in store for us. And one of the things that I have said for quite some time, and maybe you can address this either now or a little bit later, but ever since the pandemic, I think we've only seen kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak, when it comes to clinical depression and drug addictions, and we're still a good fresh 3 years out of it, and there's fear again of lockdowns and mask mandates and talk of all that kind of stuff again. So I can imagine the anxiety is running up again quite a bit. And Chris, you obviously have a counseling service, and I'm assuming a facility that helps people out as well as online stuff. And can you kind of address that a little bit, and then we'll get into your story of kind of the things that are going on?
What a great question. I mean, the way that I've talked about the pandemic, you guys, is that what was true was the volume was turned up on what was already true. So in a case of like when we enter into a place like the pandemic and some of the confusion and the unknowns and all of the feelings that we normally had the capacity to be able to navigate and mitigate, just because we have some level of tolerance to some unknowns just generally. Well, what COVID did was it took all of those things away from us.
Right.
And it turned the volume up on that. So, and I say that because like if someone had some proclivity towards worry or anxiety, the barriers that kept us from falling over the edge into that were removed. If somebody had more, a proclivity towards some depression or sadness or addiction or even some level of anger or violence or something like that, the walls were broken down by what was happening in the world for all of us. And as a result of that, so much just the elevation of, just like you said,
right,
like the depression, anxiety, all those kinds of things just came more to the surface. And then in the context of COVID, we had all of our social networks were taken away from us as well. So if we had other people that we could go to, talk to, small groups, men's groups, Bible studies, even your counselor to some degree, those things were really taken away. And so we didn't even have external help like we usually would have had in order for us to navigate through those things. So, as a counseling practice, we just saw an increase over the course of those 3 years that we were really navigating through that significantly. We're still going through it. And like you said, we're heading back in potentially, but that we're aware.
Right.
We're aware of those things. And it is really important for everyone to do. You guys were talking about, diet and health and all those kinds of things. It's really important for us to be tending to our bodies and also tending to our souls.
Amen.
And when we are taking care of those two things, then we're going to be able to I don't think escape it all, but I think actually navigate it better.
That's good. My drill sergeant, when I was in the Army, he used to say, if you look good, you feel good. If you feel good, you do good. And that goes to the depths of your soul, to what you see in the mirror, and it definitely rings true for a lot of people, especially Ben and I. We deal with this often and joke about it, but we're both we get serious, and when we lose weight, and the next thing you know, it's like wintertime and we hibernate in bears.
That's exactly it.
It's like, here we go, the bears, the hibernation's kicking in. So, well, Chris, why don't you tell us your story about how you got to where you are today, and why counseling, and kind of start back as far as you want, and talk about the nitty gritty of your testimony and your story and all of that.
Sure. Well, I'll kind of break it down into 3 parts.
Perfect.
All right. So part 1 is I live in Colorado. I grew up in Colorado. I'm one of the fortunate people that can say I'm a Colorado native. And I lived up in the mountains in my childhood. Right. So we lived pretty far out into the rural back mountains of Colorado here, the Rocky Mountains. And school was 45-minute drive away. The next neighbor was a couple miles away. So I was pretty isolated as a kid growing up. Wow. I was born into a family that was a Christian family, and yet they had a daughter, my sister, who's 5 years older than I am. She was born with pretty significant mental and physical disabilities. And so this was, she was born back in the late 60s. And so what people did with, people with disabilities like this back then was typically just institutionalize them.
Right.
Well, God bless my parents. They chose to keep her at home and actually began kind of a revolutionizing of the services that were happening in the state of Colorado in order to better provide for this population. Well, 5 years later, I'm born into the situation. And what that meant for me my entire life is that the family of origin narrative that I grew up with was very focused on her and her well-being and her needs and all that. And then the isolation of the mountains kept me kind of from those relational connections and all that. So my mom, my dad are both good people, and they have good hearts, and they missed me in some pretty significant ways as I was growing up as a boy. Those parts of me shaped who I was, right? They shape, for all of us. Our family of origin narrative actually shapes our becoming the grown-up that we are today. And so it shaped me. It gave me a sense of both compassion and care and being kind and tender to to those that need it.
Right.
But it also shaped me from like, hey, I need some distance. No one is here. So I'm going to just be a loner. I'm just going to find my way. Living in the mountains, like I said, I grew up with horses and dogs and stuff like that. I would just leave for hours on end as like a 9-year-old boy off into the mountains and come back, by dinner time kind of thing. So lots more that I could say about my family of origin. But I became a Christian at a young age and then went off to college. So kind of part two of my life is that when I left, I went to school in Chicago. I got married shortly thereafter. I worked for the Campbell Soup Company for a couple of years. I was a financial analyst and did stuff with them. And I was kind of in this growing career. But along the way, a couple of different things happened with some introductions of people we met, where our church was located, some missionaries that we supported financially, like all of those things coalesced into my wife and I deciding that we were going to leave our careers and move overseas, and we ended up living in the Middle East for upwards of 10 years.
Wow. For how many years?
Upwards of 10.
Holy cow.
Just about 10. And there was some kind of back and forth. We ended up going with one child. We came back with 3. And we were there for a long time. And it was a really challenging time for us because just living in the Middle East for that long is challenging anyway. But we landed in the country in July of 2001. And so just a few months later, 9/11 happened. Right. And then we were in the Middle East during all 9/11, what was happening to our friends and family back home. And then the whole war and all that stuff started. And it just was a very, very challenging time for us to be over there. We were undercover while we were there. And so we were trying to both bring the good news of Jesus as well as kind of keep ourselves safe for that entire time. And during that time, there were some significant tragedies that we walked through, not related to the war, just because of who we were and what we were doing there.
Right.
And at the same time, I began as a younger man to kind of recognize some things in my own life. I began to name some things of the story that I had come from and how that story was impacting my marriage. And how that story was impacting my son, and how that story was impacting my daughter. And then, like I said, we have now 3, so my other daughter as well.
Right.
And that was beginning to percolate inside of me. And as at that time, Kindle didn't exist. Amazon Prime didn't exist. We had to rely on people bringing books over to us. There were no counselors that I could see. There was no one to kind of walk me through any of this journey of my life. Right. And so I just really had to rely on books and authors. And there were several that I found kind of randomly, just looking through bibliographies of other books that I liked, found these books, ordered them, and over the course of those 10 years, read them and really began a journey of my own life and healing and inviting Jesus into some of the places where it really felt like there were some pretty deep wounds. At the same time, I was also the director of the ministry, and so I had many people over the course of the 10 years that were coming and going, some for a year, some for 2 years, some for 5 years. And there were all these young men that were ending up on my team, many of whom were just like, this is their first foray into adulthood.
Right.
And they had no idea what to do. They didn't know what it meant to be a man. They didn't know what it meant to be an adult, how to work with other people, how to treat others. All of that stuff was kind of coming up for them, and they were looking to me for guidance. And I felt like, I don't know that I have guidance for me, let alone for you. And so that began also a journey of me developing, again, my own healing journey, as well as then developing a heart to serve other people in the process. So that's part 2. Part 3 is then after those 10 years that we were there, kind of was realized that it was time for us to go home, came back to the States, went directly to seminary because I knew that I wanted to retool and retrain. I was not going to go back to Campbell Soup. I was going to go on to something else. All of these things that were awakened within me while I was there, this desire to care for other people and my own healing journey and theirs. I went to seminary and started in the Masters of Divinity program. I was going to go become a pastor because that's what good ex-missionaries do.
Right.
Come back pastor. And then during the program that I was in, there was an overlap between 2 programs, the theology track and the counseling track. So all of the counseling students took the theology classes and all of the theology students took the counseling classes. And so it just, it was this sense of like, oh, this is actually what I am longing to be and to do. And so I switched over to the counseling program, finished with a counseling, master's in counseling psychology, and then moved here to Fort Collins which is in Northern Colorado in 2010, which is where then I launched these 2 organizations that now, 13 years later, I'm giving leadership to. One is the ReStory Counseling Center, where we've got about 20 or so people on our team. They're half are local, half are across the country, and able to serve people all over. And we provide the kind of deeper story investigation, the story curiosity, where I actually believe, and I'm happy to share more about this, but I actually believe that it is in those places that healing actually comes, and how we see Jesus actually engaging in the depths of stories, not in symptom relief, not in therapy kinds of things, but like in the depth of the person's story. So we do that at ReStory Counseling. And then the other organization that I started is called Restoration Project. And while I was in seminary, I met a guy who was a pastor. He happened to live down the street, got to be really good friends with him. And what I was learning in the classroom in counseling, I had in the laboratory for in the church. Because what I really wanted was to be able to do that deeper soul work in the context of a Christian environment, in the context of church. And what I was noticing was that there, at least at that time, there wasn't much of that. It was a lot of like, question number 1, question number 2, what is your answers? What do you think of what this author said? Like that kind of engagement. There wasn't a lot of that deeper investigation of life and story. So that friend and I ended up launching Restoration Project, which is a ministry that is focused 100% on men. And our work is to help men kind of come back to who God originally made them to be as fathers, as brothers, and as sons of God. And so we create all kinds of resources and experiences that lead guys into that. We have fathering expeditions where we take dads and help them literally with their child with them and facilitate some experiences for them. We take guys on trips where it's just men only, no kids are coming along, and where we're able to do some of that investigation. I've written a couple books about rites of passage in the second half of a man's life, and even how men can brother each other more and together in those deeper ways. So the third section of my story, how I ended up here.
Praise God. Praise God. Well, that is an amazing story. I mean, for me, anytime that somebody says that they've been a missionary in the Middle East, just, man, you're getting crowns in heaven for that, for sure. That's an amazing feat. We have a kid here. I say he's a kid. He's 20-something, but his parents go to our church, and he's a missionary. He and his wife and his little kid, and gosh, where is that?
Palestine?
No, maybe it's like
I can't remember.
It's in the depths of it. I can't. Yeah. I can't. Morocco. Morocco is where it is. Yeah, and it just blows me away that they, he's 25 years old, taking his family over there, and just, if God, the safest place to be is in God's will, though. So when you're doing that, but that's an amazing feat. So let's talk about.
Well, go ahead. Yes, Chris, I have a question on something you said. When you said earlier that there was this gap or this hole, and you invited Jesus in to those areas. Obviously, I'm not asking for less, but what does that look like? Because you hear people say that a lot, right? Mm-hmm. I've heard people say before, invite Jesus in, and I think I have a kind of an idea, but as a professional and as somebody that's actually done it with themselves too, what does that look like? Give us a quick picture.
Yeah, well, a quick picture, I don't know that I can do that, but I'll try. So where I was, I'll just kind of speak for me and what I see in a lot of other people too, is that there was a significant gap in what I needed from my father and what I received from my father. Right. And I think every single one of us on earth have this hunger for their fathers, right? Kind of, we talk about father hunger. And that is something that we need to receive from them, which is, again, a whole different rabbit trail. I could go down to the words that from them, the words of blessing, the kind face of delight, and the welcome of you as a person into the world. Like, all of those things we need from our fathers. And no matter how old we are or how much we receive that, we still hunger for that the next day. Mm-hmm. Right? We still want that. Yeah. And what ends up happening is that at the end, when we don't receive that in either two ways, when we're starved of it, we just don't receive it, or what we do receive is in somehow harmful, traumatic, violent, harsh, any of those kinds of things that the Bible talks about, like fathers don't do these things, right? If it shows up in those ways, those two ways, that father hunger transforms into a father wound. Yeah. And it is those father wounds that then we kind of live with. We learn how to mitigate. We learn how to numb. We learn how to survive. And those are the things that I think eventually in our lives, especially as men, they come out sideways. They leak onto our wives and our children and our coworkers and even into our own selves. That's where I actually believe that so much of what we have in mental health is a result of those wounded stories. And so when I say to invite Jesus into it, it is not like a prayerful stance. It's not a one and done kind of a thing, but it is, as I'm talking about the deeper work of getting into story, it is this, where are the actual stories? Not the meta story like I just shared the overview of my life, but where are the actual moments, the actual stories where those wounds have occurred? And what is it like now, both for you to bring back to your own self kindness towards that younger part of you, that boy that still lives inside of you? And what is it like for you to be joined by Jesus, the ultimate Father, who's the only healer of our wounds, to also join you in that place? To see, and I love in Numbers chapter 6, where it talks about the Aaronic blessing, where, may the Lord, face turn towards you, and may he bring his face, shining face, his face of delight, his graciousness. And what ends up happening when we have the face of Jesus is that peace is the result, that there comes peace. So that's kind of what I mean. Obviously, there's a whole bunch more that I could say about that actual process, but that's what I mean when I say that.
Awesome. I appreciate that.
That's good. Really good. So, going into, that was a great question, Ben. That's a really good question.
That's because it's part of my testimony.
Yeah.
So, I'll just speak on it real quickly if you don't mind, to Chris. So that's my big glitch, right? So can you hit me with the camera? My big glitch is my relationship with God is like my relationship with my dad, right? So I'm not asking you to examine me. I'm just trying to open up so people out there know that I'm a Christian man. I've been a Christian for a while now, and I still struggle with stuff. So my issue is my dad. My dad was a decent man. He just wasn't around, and I never wanted to be like my dad. He wanted to fish. He wanted to hunt. He wanted sports. So he never got excited about anything that I was doing. He was a part of it, but he wasn't excited about like he was for the stuff that he did. And so as I've progressed in my Christianity, that one thing that keeps me from that ultimate intimacy with God is I think God wants to manage me like my dad did, right? I know that's not true, right? I know that's not true, but when you're fighting it every day, it's not always it doesn't seem always easy to invite Jesus in, or you want to hear somebody, you want to hear a professional say something about it because you're looking for something because you want to overcome it, right? You want him to overcome it for you, but you want to, I would like to overcome it because it affects my wife. It affects that really my wife is the only one in my life anymore. All our kids are grown. We've got some grandkids, but it doesn't affect them. But it affects that. And that's the way God showed me that I had the issue, because I see sometimes the way it affects my wife. And so that sent me to Christian counseling, where I started to examine these things, and the reason why I'm saying it to you now. Sometimes you sit here and you pass up opportunities because of time to ask a question or say something because you're going through it. And I think that's what this show needs to be about. So I just wanted to say that, And I appreciate the information.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story and where you've been. That so many people feel like, is it just me? Is it just me who's kind of going through some of these things, who has some of these questions? And so to hear you share that, and I'm sure you've shared portions of that on the podcast before, I feel like one of the big misunderstandings is that, especially when we talk about inviting Jesus in, is not a change of understanding. It's not going to, I can't convince myself of the truth. I can't convince my mind of what he's, we know things, but we don't know things.
That's right.
We know things, but we don't know them in our hearts. And if I can, just for a moment, I want to explain, like, my general overall understanding, reading, my hermeneutic, if you will, of the scriptures, is that the gospel is a gospel of withness, togetherness, withness. And what happened in the Garden of Eden was the breakage of the withness between humanity and God, and also between humanity and each other, right? And so between Adam and Eve and God and Adam and God, there was a breaking of the withness, the connectedness that happened there in all of its beauty and perfection. And now we have continued to live on this earth as a result of that broken connection. And I feel like people talk about, well, sin is the issue. And I feel like, yes, sin is for sure the issue. But in my mind, it's the disconnection from God that is the greatest issue. Sin might be the scissors, but it is the severing of that cord, severing of that connection, which is beautiful when you begin to look at what Jesus actually came to do, was to reestablish withness. He came in pursuit of us to bring us back to himself, to be with him. Even the name that the Bible gives to Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. And then the ultimate restoration of time is that God has come again to be with us, to dwell again with us and amongst us. And
that's good.
And so when I think about the withness of God and what you're talking about, and what does it look like to bring Jesus in, it is not believing harder. It is not praying harder. It's not convincing harder. It is a matter of this, I don't want to use the word experience, but I'm going to kind of this experience, this welcome of what is it like to bring Jesus into those micro moments where the actual wounding of our hearts, the severing of the connection began. And what you just described with your father, maybe he's not into, or he's into sports and fishing and you weren't. I would say probably it's not those things that were the most important things. It was the witness with your father that you did not experience. And that the healing of that is to bring both witness inside of you for yourself and also this connection with the ultimate Father, Jesus.
Yeah, and so the way that has played out, and I'm 52 years old now in my life, and I've only been married for 7 years. So I've only been married 7 years as a Christian. I was married when I was a young man, divorced when I was 23, single for like 20-something years, and then got married again. Where I notice it in what you just said is because my mom was the dad for the most part, because my dad he became an over-the-road owner-operator truck driver, and he was gone for weeks at a time. So how my wife deals with it is I always went to my mom for everything. Everything that I needed or wanted, I got from my mom. So I put that pressure on my wife to give me things that only God's going to give me. And he's using her to beat me into submission, right? Because she looks at me sometimes and says, I can't give it to you. Right, I look at her sometimes. I'm like, I can't give it to you. Right, so this is like a journey, and it was counseling that did all this for me. That made me realize that this. Listen, I'm not making excuses. I'm 52. I should be over this stuff, but I like the way that you have it framed up as far as it's a story. You are affected by that story. Right, it's not an excuse, but if God is going to fix these things in your life, you can't change what you don't acknowledge.
Exactly. Yeah, one of my professors and now dear friend, he says you cannot heal that which you do not name. If you don't name the thing, you can't heal it. You can't attend to it. So you actually have to recognize, like, what is going on for me. And sometimes it does take a professional to help that, read your story. Right. One of the ways I like to talk about is that, when I just gave you a flyover of my life, that is my story. I didn't lie about anything. That is my story. But it is like when I say, one of the books behind me here, if I pull it off the shelf and say, hey, what's this book about? Right. You would give kind of a summary. That's not your story. That's the summary of the story.
Yeah. We disciple guys here, telling them you need to know a 2-minute, a 10-minute, and a 45-minute version of your testimony.
Yeah,
because
for sure,
you never know how long you're going to be able to tell it, and how long because right there in events, yeah, exactly.
I could go on for 2 hours about mine and my relationship with my dad, but I can't.
Right, exactly.
It's 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's one. Go ahead.
I would say too, not just the number of minutes that you have to share, but the level of depth.
Yes, exactly.
How vulnerable are you getting? Deeper that you go,
right? And
that the book is made up of chapters, and the chapters are made up of paragraphs, and the paragraphs are made up of sentences, and the sentences are made up of words.
That's good.
And believe that Jesus is coming for every word to heal every word of your story. And so if we just stay at the chapter level, we stay at the book level summary, then we're not actually getting into the places where that's where I want to invite Jesus into every crevice of my life, in every sentence, in every word, where it can take one word to shift the meaning of a sentence. It can take a few words that will shape the course of a paragraph and a whole chapter. So that's where I actually want to, and that's the depth of the story work I'm talking about that we get into. Is I want to bring him into every single word. Now, is that possible? I'm in my 50s as well. Right. No, it's not possible to do all of it. But I also believe that this is a journey that we're on for the rest of our lives.
Amen.
And I don't out of condemnation, like you're such a screw up that you need that much time. I think it's actually out of an invitation to become far more, as I said about our ministry, far more as the man that God originally designed you to be.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's good. When you talked about being disconnected from God, I wrote down these 5 things: sin, pain, fear, worry, depression, and you can go on with that list. That causes disconnection. When we get to a place to where we're, I always call it stinking thinking. We start stinking thinking, and the next thing you know, you're doing, allowing temptation to come in, and you're falling into that temptation. And there's something else that you said too, and I just lost that brain cell. That was a good thought too.
It's a good thought.
That was a really good thought. I hate when that happens. Yeah, I know what I was going to say. When when you're diving into those things, being authentic, learning to be authentic. That's one of the biggest problems in men's ministry and men in general is that I always say that we have 5 major problems as men. It's sex, wives, money, kids, and work. And then it overarches with this one big problem called pride. And, people don't talk about it, especially men don't talk about it, but we're so simplistic that those are really the biggest problems that we have. It's sex, whether you're married and having issues there, or you're in pornography, or you have all these offset things, or you just grew up and it's just been screwed up ever since your whole life. If you're married, women come with their own problems, and you've got problems with each other, and you've got problems in your marriage, and then kids, you throw kids in there, that increases the issues a lot of times 3-4 times fold. Work, we all have to work, and unfortunately that gets in the way a lot of times. We come home tired, and we're stressed out, and we bring all that stuff home. And then money, we always do stupid things with our money, or don't do good things with it, or the economy, or all of this kind of stuff, but yet we're so prideful that we won't talk about those things. When yet the guys sitting at the same table are all going through at least one of those issues, maybe not all of them at the same time, but if we're vulnerable enough and we're open up enough about it, like we're telling our story, we're telling our testimony, people will be healed because of that. Because all of a sudden they're going, oh, dang, Jody, I didn't know you had that problem. I didn't know you used to be addicted to porn. I didn't know you used to do that. Okay, now there is hope, kind of deal. So I think you're on the right track with getting that story out and getting people to be vulnerable.
Well, if I'm right, and I have to be careful because we have a professor here, so this could be something that I thought I learned that isn't true.
Right.
But I believe that I learned a while back that in the book of Psalm, when David says, "Your heavy hand is upon me," it doesn't really mean like God is pressing his hand upon him. He really is talking about the separation that he feels between him. Like he feels the distance.
Right.
Now, that's what I was taught, that in the Greek or Hebrew, that's what that adjective or verb or something meant, right? That what he's saying there is, because of my sin, I miss you. I know what it's like to be connected with you, and I know what it's like to not be connected with you. I can say in my life that I have felt what I believe is extreme connection to God, and I have felt what is extreme distance with God. But I don't know that I know how to feel extremely close to God, because I wasn't extremely close to my father. So it's uncomfortable for me to approach anything like a son that needs something from his dad. Right? Yeah. Very, very hard. And I do it, but it's not something I'm gonna try in my own. I'm gonna do instead of be every chance that I get.
I am so grateful that you brought it back to that story as the underlying story, because I think you're right, Jody, that those are 5 main kind of issues that guys face, for sure. And they're not that women don't face those as well, but they're 5 main issues. But I would say that those issues, how we engage with those issues, is born out of that underlying story, that is born out of the way that we were shaped and wounded in life. And if I can just use the metaphor of, like, when you are first born, there's a certain nature to who you are, the kind of clay that you are, but then your parents, and especially I think as fathers, there is a molding of how he molds you. And whether it's by direction or indirection, by presence or absence, by words or no words, by violence or by kindness, like whatever it is that he's shaping you, that clay then through the course of our lives gets fired in a kiln and set. And so now as adults, we are how we are because of how we were shaped.
Right. That's good.
And what you're saying is, like, you are in your marriage, you are in your sex life, you are in your financial life, you are at work. How the narrative direction, the narrative arc has set the course for you. And I think one of the beautiful parts of what I see Jesus doing is he's inviting us to both an investigation of how do we get set on this course, and then offering us the opportunity to co-author with him a new course.
That's good.
That's why we call our counseling practice ReStory, because it's going back into the story. And if we just begin to change some of the way that we experience some, just 1-2 words, a couple of sentences, that can actually begin to reshape the course of our lives. And give us options, whereas before we didn't have options.
So in your process, like, as a pastor, I'm thinking, okay, well, they don't understand that they're a new creation. When you, by faith, are saved, you are a new creation. Your things in you should change, and, the sins of the past are no more, and the sins of the future are just a prayer and a repentance away. It's like we now have a new outlook, if you will, but yet Christians don't adhere to that, nor do they grab hold of that. And so, like in your counseling, when they're telling the story, I mean, how do you integrate? Like, listen, I always use the term truly saved. Are you truly saved? Number one, because if you're still looking like the same that you are now, if you still look the same as you did back then as you do now, then something didn't click.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I talk about it, you guys, is this, that when we become believers, 100% Jesus forgives our sin and he washes away our sin. But when we become believers, he never promised to eradicate the impact.
That's
the
good.
impact is still present. And that is where in the now and the not yet. Yes, we become believers, and yet we are not fully with him. Why? What is this in-between space? The kingdom has come and it is yet to come. Jesus has come and he is yet to come. We are living in the midst of the opportunity faith-wise to know who Jesus is and accept both his forgiveness and our salvation. And we're still commanded in scriptures to work out that salvation, become more in the likeness of Christ over the course of our lives. So sin is removed, but not the impact of sin. The trauma experience that we still, we had then is still now. It still shows up in our today life.
That's good. That's really good. That makes a lot of sense. So, kind of in a quick, not quick, but just in a summary of, let's say I called you up today. You got the ReStory.life is where your counseling counseling ministry. Is it? Do you call it a ministry or facility or practice or?
Yeah, it's not a facility because we don't have anybody coming to stay overnight.
Okay.
It's a counseling practice that we run. Yeah.
Okay. So do you do live and Zoom and online, different things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
So we got live and in person in our headquarters in Fort Collins, so you can come and do one-on-one here. We also have things called intensives, where you can come in if you're not going to do the weekly over the course of several months. You come do an intensive where we're going to spend 15 hours with you over the course of 2.5 days and really get deep into some of the stories of your life and such. Group intensives as well, where it's more than one person, which is a powerful experience.
Wow.
Then we also have marriage counseling and one-on-one things. So all of that is happening live. Half of our people, like I said, are around the country, and so they see people virtually. We have therapists and spiritual directors. We have pastoral counselors. We have life coaches. We have story work coaches, all who are on our team who can see people all around the world and do virtually. And then the other thing I'll mention too is that we have some online offerings, which is both some online courses. You can take a ReStory course about where I kind of teach through an online course through some videos. There's a course book. There's another course that if you're wanting to learn how to be with people in the midst of the story, we call it the Soul Care course, sitting in the dirt, getting in the dirt with people. Some training there. And then kind of the biggest one is called the Thrive Marriage Lab. And that is a couple of things. One is it's a year-long, 12-month cohort of couples all across the country who join us for, like I said, those 12 months. And then we have teachings that we do once a month in a live Zoom gathering. And then some recording teachings that go with that. We have interviews with all kinds of experts and authors. We provide a date night, a conversation for you as well that is related to that month topic. And then we have a husband's night and a father's night, or a husband's night and a women's night that is also live on Zoom and such. So it is a building process over the course.
Wow.
And it's because couples need something between just reading that marriage book, and then, you get to chapter 1 or 2 and you leave it on the nightstand and you never come back to it. I don't know if you guys have ever done that, but I've heard people have done that. So the marriage book that you read, we're going to read this.
Right.
Something that, and like that full-on marriage intensive that I just mentioned, this is that in-between of couples that are like, hey, we're not in crisis, but we also don't want to be in crisis. And so we're going to do some work and maintenance, kind of like you guys in your diets, right? Like
Right.
You're going to maintain some things in life so that your relationship can actually thrive. That's what we kind of lead people through in that. With that, for anybody who's interested, we have something called Thrive Dates, which is a free offering you can get from us. And we've curated 12 dates that have an activity that we have you do. And it's just an email that you get, but it's an activity that you do that leads you into a place of story, probably places of story in your marriage that you may not have ever considered or shared before. Not like deep, dark sin kinds of things, just stories about you.
Right.
What makes you who you are. And then it leads into that place of connection. So that's called Thrive Dates as well. And
That's awesome. I was looking, I saw that you had a sabbatical counseling as well. So I'm taking a sabbatical 2025. I've already got it planned. We'll have 10 years at the church, and I'll have about worn my welcome out here. They'll probably want me to leave for a little bit. So what does that look like?
Yeah, well, having been in ministry for as long as I was, and still am in ministry, sabbatical is something that's super important, I think, for us to really attend to. It's actually, the Sabbath is the fourth commandment. I don't know why we don't actually listen to, most of us are trying really hard not to murder, but most of us are not trying to actually keep the Sabbath in the same level of commandment.
Right.
Sabbaticals, especially for ministers, I think is the work that we do. I have a course for that, and then we have a couple of people on our team that will do sabbatical coaching, both before, during, and after.
Oh, wow.
So that you can get the most out of your sabbatical experience, and for you personally, for your relationships, for your walk with God, for your ministry, and all that stuff. So that's what that sabbatical stuff is.
So let's say that, I just wake up tomorrow and I am miserable. I'm stinking thinking, the world's, the sky's falling, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and I just have no hope.
So it's a Tuesday?
Yeah, exactly. So that's Monday morning for me. Like, I have that pastor's depression on Monday morning. You gear up for the big sermon, preach the sermon, then you do all the stuff in the afternoon, then I take a nap in the afternoon, then I wake up Monday morning, it's like, I got to do this again. I get that depression. So what if, so I'm that person, and I come across your website and I need help. So what would be the process? Do you triage? What do you do in that process? So kind of explain so our folks know the kind of resource that's available through you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the first thing is I would just encourage people to go to ReStory.life and kind of look through the menu, because we have all of the things that are listed there. The online courses, the intensives, the counseling, the storywork counseling, all that kind of stuff is laid out. But if you're not sure and you don't know what kind of resonates with you, right on that page is, on the homepage, is a contact us.
Okay.
Click on that. Go to that form, fill that out, and then we have this brilliant woman. Her name is Sarah, and she's what we call our client care specialist. So she's the one that gets that contact form, reads through whatever you've written, and if you're not sure, just say, I don't know, and she will either give you a call or contact you on email and do that. Like, here's what I'm hearing from you. Here are some ways that we may be able to help, and really fit you with both a right person on our team or a right service or an experience that we have, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Okay, that's great. So, tell us a little bit about the Restoration Project.
Oh yeah. What would you like to know?
Well, I've been looking at the website, and I love that it's for men and their children. And so, is it counseling? Is it discipleship? Is it just fellowship? Like, what exactly are you trying to do with this ministry?
Yeah. Well, so it's not counseling.
Okay.
It is related to counseling, because remember, it was born out of this experience that my friend and I had when I was in seminary, that I had counseling classroom that I then wanted to bring some of the goodness of what I was learning there into the church, but not have it be like all therapy speak and all that kind of stuff. So right. It is pushing into and the invitation to more of that deeper work on your life, some reflection, some awareness of what's gone on for you. What are your father wounds? What are your father, like all that kind of stuff that's happened right. for you, so that you then can be the best version of yourself for your community, for your wife, for your children, for the legacy that you actually want to leave. So we don't do counseling in Restoration Project, but we do kind of counseling-esque kinds of things at times, where we are definitely leading people into their stories and asking them to explore some of that. So you mentioned it is for fathers and children. That is one segment of the work in our fatherhood space, where I firmly believe, both from my own story, as I shared earlier, but I firmly believe that if we have healthy fathers, then we have healthy families, we have healthy churches, communities, we have healthy, schools, all the things. When fathers can come to a sense of their own well-being, that also leaks out and bleeds out onto others. So I want to make sure that we're doing as much as we can to deepen and develop men into the fathers that God made us to be. And here's the thing, is that I think it's actually every man on earth is called by God to be a father, whether or not he has children. That every man is a father. He has that father energy within him that God gave him as an image bearer of God, and is called to bring it. So the fatherhood space, what we do primarily is we're helping men get into their own lives and stories, as at the same time as we are helping them develop a deeper connection with their child. And so all of our fatherhood experiences are father and child. It's never just child. We don't run camps and that kind of thing. But we do experiences that involve camping, but it is all father and child. And there are several different levels of, the age of the child kind of determines what experience is right for you. And we do it with fathers and boys and fathers and daughters and all that. So, but all along the way, it is to help you investigate your own life as a father, so that you can then be the father that your child actually needs you to be. And it's super fun. And we create that space, and there's memories that are being made and words that are being spoken over the kids and all that would have never been spoken otherwise. So that's the fatherhood space. Brotherhood is, I have another book called The Brotherhood Primer, that is all about helping men have a different experience of a small group of men, where it's diving into that restorative work of your life and your story with one another. And so it's called The Primer because it's meant to prime the pump of deeper masculinity and relationships. It's not ever meant to be the end all, but kind of get that going. And I've laid it out so that it's very clear. I'm like, you do these things, you walk this path, you will actually both share your story, you will get into some vulnerable places with one another, you'll hear each other, you'll come to know each other better. Like all that stuff is within that Brotherhood Primer.
That's great.
Around that, we've got, these men's trips that we run that are just men only, and facilitate these kinds of groups all across the country, where churches are having brotherhood groups and stuff like that. We kind of help get those going. And then in the sonship space, which is our third, understanding who you are as a son of God, is really what we were talking about just a little while ago, of like, what is your identity? Have you forgotten actually who you are? And have some experiences and resources around that as well. And that would kind of parlay with the the Sage book that I mentioned a little while ago, that there is a book that I just came out with last year, which is all about this intentional movement from man into the sage season of his life. A book I wrote about the first rite of passage, Man Maker Project, is also one. It's about this intentional rites of passage that a father leads a boy on to become a man.
Wow.
The sage is the intentional rites of passage process for you to go from man into sage, and what that looks like for you. So that would fall more in that sonship space.
That's great. Now, is this, I'm assuming you took your sons and daughters through some of this? Or,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was really born. My son is my oldest. And so when he was 12, I was kind of like, well, when he was 1 day old, I was holding him in my arms in the hospital and was going, oh my goodness, Lord, I did not receive what I needed. How am I possibly going to give him what he needs?
Right.
So that really began the first kind of 12 years of his life was my own work, where I was kind of working on myself. And then he turned 12, which is a whole bunch of reasons why, but there's, that's a good year that I think, 12, 13, 14 years for that rites of passage process for boys to go through, which we don't do in
Right.
our society. Just don't do that well and right. And so I was looking around, I was like, I don't see anything. I don't see anything that feels like I actually want to employ. It felt like there were some good enough resources out there, but I just started to kind of craft my own. And then in the journey of that, people were like, what are you doing with your son? Can you tell me what that is? Can you write that down? And that's kind of where the Man Maker Project book came from.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of books on, taking boys to manhood, but they're like, knights in shining armor. It's kind of that genre. Yeah, so
the only one I can, think of is that one, that I'm familiar with is Fathered by God, John Eldridge.
Yeah.
So I'm getting ready to start that book.
Fathered by
It's
God.
interesting you say that, yeah. Huh?
Yeah, it's a really good book. It's not a rites of passage book.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think Wild at Heart would probably be the rites of passage one that he does.
That's like for men, though.
Yeah, straight up. It's not for.
Not for
I mean,
kids.
there's really nothing for.
No,
kids.
we had a guest last year that talked a little bit about the rites of passage, totally different thing, you know what I'm
Right.
saying? But he was doing the rites of passage with his children.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a buddy of mine who's he's probably in his 80s, used to be an ex-Michigan State football player, and
Yeah.
a guy by the name of Tom Harmon, and he does what a festival of lights is what he calls it. And he's got like 28-something grandchildren, and so every year he reads through the Bible, and while he's reading through that, he writes notes and encouragements and all of this kind of stuff for his grandchildren. And when they turn 13, they have the whole family comes together and they have this passage. It's almost like a bar mitzvah that they're pushing. Telling him he's a man or she's a woman, and he'll give them this Bible. And the dad and the mom will be there, and it's really about the granddad just passing on kind of that sage experience is what you're talking about here. On down to his grandchildren, but every one of them get a Bible, and I've seen his Bibles when he works on it. Man, it's just littered all throughout it, just notes and comments and scripture references, and it's just
so strong.
It's huge. So
It's incredible. That sounds amazing.
He does a great job with that. So we for about 4 years in a row until I got too sick to do it, I get altitude sickness, so me coming to see you, I don't think that'll ever happen anytime soon. We used to go to, up until last year was my last year, we would hike 14ers there in Colorado, and it's the one, I think it's Mount Evans, that has Little Chicago Lake on it. It's
I believe so. Yeah, there's like a lot of 14ers, so I don't know exactly.
Okay,
all of them,
yeah, I think it's Mount Evans is the one. We own it too.
14er in Colorado is like...
Well, there's like 25, 21 of them. I know it. But we would climb and we would hike up, 8 miles in, and we would camp at 11,500 feet. And then the summit, it's the one where you can drive up on the back side of it. It's like the highest road. I think that's... But... So we would take these. We would take our sons, but we would also take these young guys that were 18 to 30 somethings, and it was me and another guy, Jeff Voth. It was actually he did it, invited me to come along, man, and I just fell in love with it. But we would stay 4 nights up there, camping just in the middle of nowhere, nobody around, and we would go down to the lake and catch some salmon and bring it up and cook it and eat dried food all week, and it was just a really good time. But at the end of that week, we're all just stinky and tired, and we're ready to go to, I think it's Bojo's Pizza is what it is. Yeah. Oh my gosh, they sell pizza by the pound. It's 3 pounds and 5 pounds. And after eating the junk we've eaten all week, it's great to go get that. But at the very end of the week, we spend the last night, and we have this affirmation circle, and you get all the guys together. We've got a fire going. Everybody stands up, and whoever's, we just pick somebody randomly. Okay, we're going to start with you, and close your eyes, and then we'll say we want 3 people to raise their hand and just speak life into this guy, whoever it is, and it just those 3 people will speak life into that person. It goes to the next guy, and man, by the time you get to the end of the circle, everybody's bawling and crying and just vulnerable and just so moved by that, and it's just such you almost float down the mountain the next day.
Yeah,
and it's just an amazing opportunity.
I love all the intentionality around that. It is so good to hear, and that's what it takes. It doesn't just happen by accident. It takes a lot of thoughtfulness and intentionality, and then crafting of the words that you want to offer to your children. So that sounds absolutely brilliant. That's
really good. So
I just wrote a question about the Sage book. Are you that book, is it meant for like dads that have children that they're still bringing up? As far as they're gonna be a sage to somebody, or could also somebody buy it that just wanted to be like a disciple maker to other younger men?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. All of the books actually are for all men of all ages. So the Man Maker Project is specifically designed for a father and a son. So I have yet to write the father-daughter book, which I will eventually. But the Sage book is, I talk about it in a sense like if you're like 35 and older,
got it.
This is for you, because it's actually, even if you're not like right, whatever you want to call it, 40 or 50 or something, you're heading into that second half of your life. If you're not right there, at least you can have a vision of where you're headed. You need to have a vision of what's to come, and maybe some of the work that you need to do in and of your own life, so that as you enter into that next season of your life, you're prepared. You know where to go, even if it's not right now. I actually, when I was 16 years old, I lived in Germany as an exchange student, and I had a couple of English fiction books. They were my only English outlet. I was with a German family in a German home in a German school, and everything was German. The only place that I had just to like turn my mind into English was these fiction books. I fell in love with these books, and they've actually given me such shape to who I am today. One of the things was, in those books, there were some characters who were sages. They were these older, wiser kind of men who then like influenced the whole story between, it was a 5-part book, or 5 books. And I just fell in love with that as a 16-year-old. And then, it took me a few years to get into the age where I actually could imagine becoming a sage. And that's what really set me forth on that journey of when I turned 40, when I turned 45, when I turned 50, there were some things that I just really wanted to investigate in my life. So as a 35-year-old, as a younger man, absolutely, it would be something for you to consider. And then, we also have a Sage Experience. That is something that it's called the Sage Experience. And I am, like, last year I took a group of men to Ireland. I'm taking a group of men to Scotland.
I saw that. I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, I want to go to that one.
That sounds like the Sage Experience I'm looking for. All right, you sold me.
Yeah, like, and you guys were going in January because the landscape, actually the kind of wild and rugged and weathery kind of landscape of Scotland represents a lot of what's going on inside the heart of a man right around transition stage.
So we just got back from Iceland. I feel like that was more what's going on in the heart of it, man. Just frozen cold.
No, that's just a guy with no brain cells to go to Iceland. Like my son wants to go so bad to Iceland. I'm like, why? Let's go to Hawaii. Well, not Hawaii now, but let's go to Fiji or something.
Well, Chris, if your media team gets sick and they can't make the trip, I will gladly go in their stead and take some pictures for you. We'll get our team going.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Well, it's going to be a great trip. I loved this last trip that we did. It was our first one. This will be our second. So
awesome.
There's still spots. We've got 15 guys that are going. We've still got some spots left.
Wow, that's awesome. So what, like last year, what was so great about it? You took them to Ireland, and did you make them all wear kilts and, you know?
Well, I mean, there is some element of play like that for sure. And I think let me phrase it this way. If the task of the first passage is for the father to find the man within the boy to call him forth, the task of the second passage is for the man to find the boy within the man and to bring him home.
Got it.
Where he comes home to himself. And so there are elements of play. We're out doing some active kind of outdoor experience type things and all that. We go to some pretty desolate places as well, really just to kind of remove all the distractions and really kind of come face to face with your own soul, with the past life that you've had, with the life that is yet to be had, all that. So there is some movement there. There's obviously some work that we do in some small groups conversations, some one-on-one conversations, those kinds of things as we're navigating it. It's not a sightseeing trip. I mean, if you want to go to Scotland and see all the sights, this is probably not the trip for you, but this is more of a pilgrimage of the soul where we are leading guys into that passage.
It's awesome. Like you're taking them out of the noise and actually letting them hear their own voice. That's great.
In some ways, it feels like a pilgrimage. It feels like a pilgrimage. And it's not a pilgrimage to go to a place. It's a pilgrimage to go to a place inside.
Right. Wow.
And we're using the landscape for that. So every one of us is going to become elderly, but not every one of us will become an elder. And there's a big difference.
Wow, that's good.
And that's the shift into sage that I think is really important. And we need elders. We need elders in our society. Just as much as we need men to be full men, we need sages to be full sages.
Right. That's great. Wow, that is awesome. Well, Chris, as we kind of wrap up, is there anything else you'd like for our audience to know?
Oh,
so did we hit everything?
That's a broad question.
Yeah.
I think I would say this too, given where we've gone in the conversation, that you guys, it's never too early and it's never too late. It's never too early in your journey to start doing some good heart level work. And it's also never too late to do some good heart level work. I feel like I work with some guys, especially in the sage stuff, that, I'm in my 70s or 80s and, I can't teach an old dog new tricks. I'm like, well, is Jesus available for you? Well, if the answer is yes, then more is available for you.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it's never too late, and then it's never too early. One of the most, favorite clients that I ever got to work with was a 21-year-old man. He came in, he had in counseling, we call it presenting issues. There was nothing actually that he was like, I'm dealing with this addiction, I'm dealing with depression, or whatever, those kinds of things. He's just like, I am here because I want to be the man that God made me to be, and I want someone to help me journey into that. Can you help me? And it was this really brilliant time that we got to spend together so that I can step into marriage, I can step into fathering, I can step into a full-time career with the fullness as best as I can, knowing that I'm going to keep growing over the course of my life, but the best that I can as a whole young man. So never too old, never too young.
That is great.
Love it.
Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, because out of it come the issues of life.
Amen.
Yeah. That's exactly what he's talking about.
That's good.
It all comes from the scars and the places that our heart's been.
That's good.
And I'm learning that day by day the most important thing God ever told me in my life is to focus on you. And I'll focus on everybody else. And when you start to really look at yourself, you really start to see how broken you are.
Yeah.
And how awesome this book can help you, along with people that know what they're doing, you know?
That's good.
So I just wanted to throw that in there. I haven't said it in a few episodes. It's my favorite verse now.
That's good.
My favorite verse used to be, a man that finds his life will lose it, but a man that loses his life for my sake will find it. What I've realized is if you don't get Proverbs 4:23 right, you can't do the second. You can't do that. You can't do the second.
So, quick question before we close out here, Chris. So, what advice would you give to pastors who, we deal with a lot of situations to where we're not really qualified for counseling, but yet people still come to us, and I kind of have a three meeting rule, so to speak. After 3 visits and they can't figure it out and I can't figure it out, then I send them to counseling, Christian counseling. Like, at what point is that a good rule, or should I stop at 1, or at what point do I? Because especially after the pandemic, man, it got really, really ugly for a long time in churches. So.
Well, I think anytime somebody says, what advice can you give to pastors, the first thing I always want to say before I get to your question is, you guys do your own work. Do your own heart work. Tend to your own heart. Put on your own oxygen mask first, right? You've got to make sure that you are doing well. If you want to have a good ministry, you need to make sure that your heart is well. So do your own work in this area. You can only take someone as far as you yourself have gone, and so make sure that is a place for you to start as a pastor. When it comes to that specific question, I think the three meeting rule is a really good one. You need to make sure that the person who's coming to you is feeling seen and heard, that they have a sense of relationship with you, that there is an accessibility to you, and also an awareness that you have other responsibilities to be shepherding a larger flock of people, and your time needs to be given to the body, not the one.
Right.
Now, so that's hard. That's hard, and you as a pastor need to be able to hold that line. I would also then say, know before that person shows up for session number 1 with you in your office, what your referral sources are going to be.
Right.
Vet them, know them, have a sense of relationship with them, take those counselors out for coffee, do that kind of work so that you have a sense of who they are, confidence in who they are. Because then that referral is going to actually stick better.
Right.
That person is going to get the work done that you want them to get done if they have felt like they're being referred to somebody you actually know and trust. And not every therapist, not every counselor is created equal. So make sure that you're doing some good work in that vetting process.
Great advice.
I did mention earlier too that soul care course, the Sitting in the Dirt course, that is designed for people in ministry who want to know how to do this better, want to know how to sit with people better, want to know what postures to take. A colleague and I teach that course together. He's the pastor and a counselor, and am I. And I think we have 50 years experience between us. And so
awesome.
We taught this course, which is an online course for you to take, that then you can also get some supervision from him if you like over the course of time, some help in those kinds of things. But in that course, we actually talk about what are some of the parameters that we recommend for pastors with regard to how long should you be meeting people? What is the setup for that meeting? How do you email them? How do they contact you? What are what is mandated reporting as a pastor? All of those kinds of things that you as a minister need to know. We've tried to put into that course.
That's really good. And that's called the Soul Care Course, Sitting in the Dirt. Okay.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, well, Chris, man, it has been a pleasure talking with you. It's been a breath of fresh air just hearing I love your spirit. I love the tone of your voice. It's very soothing. I think you definitely found your calling for sure. And, man, I would just puke my guts up if I was sitting in front of you right now. It's just it just feels so inviting. I appreciate that. It's very, very good. So people can see you at restory.life. As well as the Restoration Project. Is that .com? What is that? That is
restorationproject.net.
Okay, .net. Okay, restoration.net. That'll go through all of our chat feeds, as well as all the ads and stuff that we do for the podcast. So we'll have those linked as well to all your stuff. And then the Sage book they can get on Amazon, I'm assuming.
Yeah, any of the books we talked about are on Amazon.
Okay, great. I'm going to get the Sage book. That's a good one because I'm getting in those years now. So.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Yeah,
I already told both of them it's time for them to retire and be elders, but they won't listen to me.
Well, you guys should come to Scotland with me. Come to Scotland.
Oh, that would be awesome.
I tell you what, that would be a blessing, big time. I'm preparing for my sabbatical. I'm doing Greece and Israel.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to try to do like Paul's walk and then the Jesus's walk in Israel. So my wife and I are going to do that. We're going to dump kids and take off. And that's in 2025. So Lord willing, the creek don't rise.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Well, Chris, God bless you, brother. Thank you so much for your time. And we will be praying for you. We'll probably more than likely send some referrals to you as well. And I can already tell that I'm going to send some people, especially for the online stuff. Some people don't like to meet, and they really like to do it online. So that's a good opportunity for them to get engaged and get some counseling. So again,
awesome. Well, thank you. So great to be with you all today.
Thank you, brother. We will talk to you soon, and God bless.
Okay, take care.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Man Up God's Way podcast. Visit us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and our website at manupgodsway.org. You've been listening to the Man Up God's Way podcast. Visit us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and our website at manupgodsway.org.